Are we good or bad? I mean, like deep down, is it in our nature? Or is it all about the stuff we learn and how society shapes us? Kind of keeps philosophers up at night, right? And that's what makes diving into Xunzi so fascinating. He's this major figure in classical Confucianism, 3rd century BCE, China. But his story in the Confucian tradition, it's kind of bumpy, Times of being in the spotlight, then fading into the background.
Exactly. He's right up there with Confucius and Mencius as one of the big three in classical Confucianism.
Yeah.
But yeah, his reception has been, well, let's just say complex. Seen as the Confucian who went astray, a lot of that because of his view on human nature, which can sound pretty pessimistic. But lately, there's been a big shift. People are rediscovering his work, seeing the depth and the insights. And that makes him even more interesting to us philosophers, right? That tension in how he's been understood over time.
Definitely. So for this deep dive, we're working with the Xunzi text itself. It's a collection put together after his death, so that comes with its own issues, as you can imagine. And then there's Sima Qian's biography. Now, Sima Qian's not always seen as the most neutral source, especially when it comes to intellectuals. Our mission here is to go through these sources carefully, see what Xunzi's really saying, and get a grip on his unique perspective on human nature, moral cultivation, even his thoughts on heaven, and the whole deal with language. We want to give you, our fellow philosophy enthusiast, a good look at a thinker whose ideas offer a pretty compelling alternative to some of the major philosophical trends out there. So let's jump into the deep end, shall we? Xunzi's probably most known for his idea of human nature, and it's the one that often gets him in trouble, right?
That's the one. He's famous, or maybe infamous, for saying human nature is evil. That's Xing, right? And right away, you see the contrast with Mencius, who's all about human nature being inherently good, Shan. But here's the catch. Even though they both use that word, Xing, they mean different things by it. That's where the trouble starts.
Okay, so when Xunzi says human nature is evil, he's talking about Xing as what we're born with, our basic abilities, the stuff we're naturally capable of, and our desires. It's not like he's saying we're stained with sin or anything. It's more about that raw, unpolished state of being human. And what he's saying is if we just went with those impulses, no guidance, no thinking it through, well, things would get messy, bad messy.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, both Xunzi and Mencius believe we can become good. The difference is where they start. Like, what's that starting point, that Xing? It's fascinating. We've got these archaeological finds, the Gordian texts from around 300 BCE, and they kind of challenge the traditional view. They define Xing more in line with what Xunzi's saying, like the inborn stuff that makes a species. Makes you wonder, was Mencius the outlier back then? Really important stuff for understanding the whole picture.
So goodness doesn't come built in, then where does it come from in Xunzi's view? If we're not born with it, how do we get it?
That's where artifice comes in. And Xunzi calls it way. It's everything we pick up along the way. Our habits, the good stuff we learn, how we choose to act. He's pretty clear about it. What is good in people is their artifice, he says. See, if we just followed our Xing, let those emotions run wild, we'd end up in a constant struggle for whatever we could grab. Contention and robbery, that's what he calls it. But through transformation, waxing through teachers, rituals, moral teachings, that's how we develop good qualities. Deference, courtesy, the things that make a society work. It's not about squashing our nature, it's about refining it, shaping it into something better. It almost makes you think Xunzi saw society as this kind of delicate thing, always on the verge of falling apart if we don't keep reinforcing it from the outside.
So then how do we cultivate that goodness? If it's not in us from the start, what's the process? And that takes us right to ritual, lili, and music, huge in Xunzi's philosophy, right?
Absolutely massive. Mencius, he's all about looking inward, nurturing those little sprouts of goodness, the four beginnings he talks about. But Xunzi, he's saying, look outward. The best examples, the models for ethical behavior, they're outside of us. They're in the rituals, the lie, passed down by the sages. And these sages, the Shungin, they're not just heroes from the past. They're the ones who perfected themselves, transformed their Xing through Wei, and they embodied that understanding in the rituals they created.
So how did these rituals come about in the first place? What's the origin story there?
It's interesting, there are echoes of social contract theories, the kind we find in Western thought way later. Xunzi says the sages, they saw what would happen if everyone just followed their desires. Chaos, basically. It wouldn't be sustainable, like he says. If people follow their desires, then boundaries cannot contain them and objects cannot satisfy them. Thus, the former kings restrained them and established for them ritual and morality in order to divide them into classes. They created ritual and morality to set some boundaries, to bring order out of potential chaos.
But he's not saying rituals are just some random set of rules, right? There's something deeper going on there.
Right, he's not just making stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
He says these rituals, they're legitimate because they fit with that which makes humans human. That's renji sui wei, renjia. They recognize natural distinctions, man, like the difference between men and women, young and old. It's part of being human, seeing these differences, and the sages' rituals give us a way to organize and acknowledge them.
And it goes beyond just keeping society running smoothly, right? Rituals actually help us grow morally and emotionally. He makes a big deal out of that.
Big time. If rituals were just about being practical, they wouldn't have this deep meaning for Xunzi. He says they actually shape our character, our emotions, in a good way, like take funeral rites. He uses that example to show how they teach us to avoid being rude or stingy when we grieve. Or the 3-year mourning period. That's not just a random rule, it's a structured way to process really strong feelings without losing control. He says, when a wound is colossal, its duration is long. When pain is profound, the recovery is slow. The 3-year mourning period is a form established with reference to emotions. It is the means by which one conveys the acme of one's pain. Rituals give us a framework for those big emotions.
Even the village wine drinking ceremony, the Sheng, he uses that to show how rituals embody those principles of social order, respect for hierarchy, who drinks when, who gets invited. It's all very specific and reinforces that social harmony.
Yeah, it's all laid out. Who offers the cup to whom, the order of toasts based on age and social standing. It reinforces those distinctions. It's not about exclusion, it's about creating cohesion. And through participating, through doing these things over and over, we internalize those moral principles the sages built in.
And then there's music. Always connected to ritual for Xunzi.
Totally. It's another part of human artifice.
Yeah.
But it focuses on expressing our emotions in an orderly way. And he recognizes we have these strong impulses. Xunzi 20.1 even talks about them. It's not about getting rid of emotions. It's about expressing them in a way that doesn't cause harm. And the sages, they created music, specifically the odes, the shi, to channel those emotions constructively.
He even defends music against the Mohists. They thought it was a waste of resources.
Yeah, Modi and his followers, they were all about practical stuff. Xunzi says they missed the point. Music's not just entertainment, it shapes our character, it creates social harmony. He's pretty bold about it. When music is centered and balanced, the people are harmonious and not dissipated. Enemy states dare not invade. Strong music, strong society, even strong defense.
And talking about politics, he brings ritual into statecraft too, especially in his debate about warfare.
Oh yeah, there he lays out the Confucian way. A true king, a wang. They achieve success, even in war, through ritual order, not through brute force like a hegemon, a ba. You can see this in earlier texts, the Zuo's one. But Xunzi takes it further. He's saying being a true king means embodying that ritual order. That's the key to success. When kings and dukes follow the rituals, that is how they obtain the world. Pretty clear message there.
And he even analyzed the state of Qin, the one that ended up unifying China. He said they were strong, but missing something crucial. Confucian advisors, people steeped in ritual and morality.
That's the thing. Qian had the power, but Xunzi saw the weakness. No moral grounding. And a lot of historical accounts seem to agree with his long-term assessment.
So if ritual is so important for moral development, how did those first sages get there? They didn't have rituals, right? Where did they start?
That's the question, isn't it? How did they perfect themselves without a roadmap? Xunzi says rituals are like markers. They mark the way. Like signs showing you the safe path through a river. The way that's Dao, and it's all about constancy, chain. The natural processes of heaven, tanxing, they're unchanging. So what we need to do is respond to those patterns with the right order, with Yi. It's not about heaven intervening directly, it's about human governance. We decide our fate, not the gods. He uses the example of Yu and Ji, the sage king and the tyrant. The revolutions of the sun, moon, and stars and the cyclical calendar, these were the same under Yu and Jia. Same heaven, different outcomes.
So heaven sets the stage, but it's up to us to understand the way, that pattern, and embody it through ritual.
Exactly, and Xunzi makes a distinction. Knowing heaven, Zidin, versus knowing the way, Zidao. Trying to figure out the ultimate workings of heaven, it's a waste of time, we'll never get there.
Yeah.
But the way, those constant patterns, their practical applications, that we can understand. It's like, we can figure out how gravity works, but the why, the ultimate reason behind it, that might be beyond us. Focus on what you can work with. That's Xunzi's message. Their aspiration with respect to heaven is no more than to observe the phenomena that can be taken as regular periods.
Yeah.
That's our job. Observe and understand those regularities.
So rituals aren't just random rules, they're expressions of those fundamental patterns of the universe. Heaven's way,
Huh.
there to guide us.
That's it. And this brings up a big debate in Xunzi studies. Is the way an objective reality, or is it something we humans construct? That unchanging order, is it out there, or are we making it up?
Now, that's a question that gets to the heart of epistemology and metaphysics.
It does. A.C. Graham, the scholar, he put it this way, is Xunzi saying man imposes his own meaning on an otherwise meaningless universe. Graham thought no, but some people make a strong case for a more constructivist view.
What makes them think that? What's the evidence?
There's a line in Xunzi 8.3 that gets a lot of attention. The way is not the way of heaven, nor the way of earth. It's what people regard as the way, what the noble man is guided by. Sounds like he's saying, forget the natural order, we make our own rules.
But he's always talking about observing those natural cycles, like the seasons. How do you reconcile that with this idea of constructing the way?
That's the tricky part. Yang Liang, an early commentator on Xunzi, he tried to explain it. He said Xunzi meant that the way isn't in those weird, inexplicable events. It's in the regular stuff, the things we can rely on and put into practice. Plus, Xunzi keeps saying there's only one way, not separate ones, for heaven, earth, and humans. Like he says, there are no two ways in the world, and the sage is never of two minds.
So maybe it's about focusing on the way as it relates to us, to human flourishing, using those natural patterns as models, not getting hung up on the stuff we can't explain.
Makes sense. It fits with Xunzi's practical approach. We need to understand the way so it can benefit us. The natural world might operate on this one underlying principle, but for us, it's about the parts we can work with, the things that help us grow morally and socially. Like the seasons, they're a model for order, for regularity.
And that focus on what's practical, what matters to us, it shows up in his view of portents, too. Those Yao, he didn't buy into that whole science from heaven thing, did he?
Nope, not at all. Comets, earthquakes, that kind of stuff. He called them shifts in heaven and earth, transformations of yin and yang, material anomalies, just natural events, nothing more. That's in Xunzi 17.7. Instead, he talks about human portents, or Renyao. Those are the actions we take that mess things up. Poor plowing that harms the harvest, hoeing and weeding out of season, governmental malice that causes the loss of the people, things like that.
So the problem isn't heaven sending us messages, it's us making bad choices.
Exactly. We're the source of our own problems, not some divine being trying to tell us something. And this goes for religious ceremonies, too. He says they don't have magical power, they're more about aesthetics and social bonding. He has this great line. If the sacrifice for rain is performed, and it rains, what of it? I say, it is nothing. Even if there had been no sacrifice, it would have rained. To take them as embellishment is auspicious. To take them as spiritual is inauspicious.
It's all very rational, very grounded. And that continues into his philosophy of language. His essay on rectifying names, Zhenming, is a good example.
Oh, yeah. He makes some interesting points about language itself. But his main concern is morality and politics, not just linguistics. He says, names have no inherent appropriateness. We designate them by some word in order to name them. Which sounds pretty practical, right? But he's got a bigger goal in mind.
He also tackles those sophistical paradoxes that were popular back then, like the white horse is not a horse argument. What did he make of all that?
He breaks them down. And he says, yeah, maybe they make sense logically, but they're useless for governing for morality. Disputes with no use, he calls them. For him, language has a job to do. It's a tool for the ruler, the true king, the Wangzi, to promote good behavior and unity. He's very clear about this. When one who is a king determines names, if names are fixed and realities distinguished, then he may cautiously lead the people and unify them by this means.
So names, they might be arbitrary at first, but they have to match up with reality eventually. How do we make sure that happens?
Xunzi says we use the Heaven-Endowed Bureau, the Tiang one. Our senses, and this is important, the heart-mind, sin. Our senses take in the physical world, but the heart-mind, it goes beyond that. It understands statements, reasons, happiness, resentment, grief, joy, love, hate, and desire. The whole range of human experience. He's a realist through and through. Reality is out there, whether we like it or not. This goes against some other philosophies of the time, like in the Xunzi, Xunzi's firm. Names are that by which one defines different real objects. That Heaven-Endowed Bureau, that's his grounding, his way of making sure language reflects reality.
And that brings us to the heart-mind, the Xunzi. You said it's central to everything in Xunzi's philosophy.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's the keystone. But we got to remember, in ancient China, they didn't think of the mind as just being in the brain. Sin is both heart and mind, the feelings and the thinking all wrapped up in one. And for Xunzi, it's how we understand the way. He borrows three qualities from earlier traditions, especially the Xunzi, to describe it. Emptiness, zero, unity, yi, and tranquility seen.
So what do those three things mean for Xunzi's idea of knowledge? How do they work?
Okay, so emptiness is like the heart-mind's ability to take in tons of information without getting full. Unity is how it takes all that information and makes sense of it, finds the patterns. And tranquility, that's the ability to tell the difference between clear thinking and just letting your imagination run wild. With those three working together, we can process what we experience, what we see and hear, and figure out the patterns that underlie everything. There's a chapter called Resolving Blindness, and it's all about how if we don't use those abilities right, we end up making bad choices.
So the heart mind, it's not just sitting there taking in information, it's actively doing something with it. It's in charge, right?
Totally in charge. Xunzi calls it the lord of the body. It's the only organ that can give orders, and it knows itself. He's really clear about that. The mind is the lord of the body. It issues commands, but does not receive commands. It's the source of artifice, of way. It's what drives that transformation of our Ixing. He says, when the heart-mind reasons and the other faculties put it into action, this is called artifice. And get this, it can even overrule our basic instincts, even self-preservation, if those instincts go against what's right, against the lie. The heart-mind, for Xunzi, it's where responsibility lies. It's what guides us to understand the way and live by it. It's like he's saying, forget that inner compass, you got to build your own.
He even compares governing a kingdom to how an individual functions, with the heart mind being that ruler, right?
Yeah, it's a great analogy. Just like a kingdom needs good governance, rituals, laws, and a strong ruler, an individual needs the right methods, rituals, learning, and that guiding force within, the heart mind. Where you start doesn't matter as much as how you manage things, how you direct your energy. Like they say, it's not where you start, it's where you finish.
So what happened to Xunzi's ideas after he died? He made such a big contribution. What was the impact?
So when he was alive, he was a big deal. People called him the most revered of teachers. He had some pretty famous students, including some who went on to become key figures in legalism, like Han Fei and Li Si. Early Han Dynasty, you have guys like Lu Jia, influenced by Xunzi's focus on human actions as the cause of good or bad fortune, though he added the idea of qi into the mix. But then things changed. His reputation took a hit. People criticized his evil human nature idea and his link to legalism, which wasn't seen as very Confucian. Figures like Ji Kang and Zhu Ji, they were pretty harsh on him. For a long time, he was kind of sidelined in Confucian thought.
But you said earlier he's making a comeback these days.
Oh yeah, big time. In East Asia and really all over, people are rediscovering Xunzi. His writings survived, and a lot of those old criticisms, they don't hold up so well anymore. People are seeing the depth, the originality of his ideas. He's back to being their revered teacher, finally getting the recognition he deserves. That discovery of the Godian texts really throws a wrench in the traditional view of early Confucianism, doesn't it? So it doesn't seem so out there anymore. It's like there was more diversity of thought back then than we realized.
So wrapping up this Xunzi deep dive, we've seen how he offers a really unique perspective within Confucianism. His view of human nature as something we need to actively shape through ritual and artifice, guided by that amazing heart mind. It's a powerful counterpoint to other schools of thought. His emphasis on learning from external models, his rational take on heaven, portents, even language, it all comes together in a really complex and interesting way.
Exactly. He connects all these ideas. Human nature, ritual, the way, language, the heart mind. It's a whole system, and it's still relevant today. He challenges us to think about where morality comes from, how culture shapes us, the whole question of knowledge and reality.
And for our listeners, here's something to ponder. How does Xunzi's focus on external cultivation, on building morality through ritual, compare to those traditions that emphasize inner reflection and innate goodness? And what about his idea of the way as something maybe both discovered and constructed? What does that mean for how we think about ethics today? We encourage you to check out the Xunzi for yourselves and all the great scholarship that's out there. This deep dive, it's just a starting point. There's so much more to explore.